Hello, everyone. This is Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, with me, the awesome, the indomitable, on the job journalist, Aaron Maté, journalist of The Nation and The Gray Zone, and has just wrote an awesome article in Real Clear Politics. And part of the reason why I'm glad to have him on the show. Please welcome journalist Aaron Maté.
Thanks for having me. As I understand it, you're the one who gave me the nickname the Buzzsaw, which
I am the one that gave you the nickname Buzzsaw because I think it was maybe the second or third time I saw you eat somebody alive on the set of Russiagate. I saw you in all of these like back and forth these battles, and you were like eating people alive on this particular issue. I was like, this guy's Buzzsaw. He's killing them.
Well, it's not hard because you're basically arguing with people who are acting like teenagers who still believe in Santa Claus. So, but anyway, I appreciate you giving me the nickname. I've just seen on on social media and stuff. Many people call me that, and even some friends of mine have been teasing me by calling me that as well. So,
that's funny. That's good teasing, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
There are worse ways to be teased. Trust me. So I am so glad to have you on the show with everything that's breaking with the whole Russiagate stuff. And it seems like the story continues to fall apart. Solomon at the Hill has been writing really good stories on this, but you probably more than anybody else that I am aware of have been on it, particularly at your post on Real News Network. But even now, still. So I want to start just at the basics of the beginning of this and why you were skeptical of this in the initial breaking of this. What was the thing that initially tipped your hat off to, okay, maybe there's something wrong with this story?
In the summer of 2016, early July is when there was a major article in The Atlantic called something like, "Is Trump Putin's Puppet?" And it was by Franklin Foer. And then I saw increasingly Democrats use that in their political messaging as part of the campaign. That coincided with this firm CrowdStrike coming out and accusing Russia of being behind the theft of Democratic Party emails. The CrowdStrike thing happened in mid-June 2016. And, I saw increasingly it being an attack line by Democrats to go after Trump for having these Russian ties. But yet, when I would look at what they were adducing to substantiate their claims, I just didn't see much evidence. And, in general, I'm not comfortable with sort of Cold War chauvinism, and this notion to begin with that anything associated with Russia is somehow nefarious. And unfortunately, I saw many people going along with this. It became sort of fashionable, even in progressive circles, to, go after Trump on the basis of having these really ill-defined Russia ties. I used to work at the show Democracy Now! I was there for 10 years.
Yep.
And even then, in the summer of 2016, were pushing this. They had on Kurt Eichenwald, who to me is a discredited journalist who also was an early peddler of this stuff. So just from a journalistic point of view, I just thought that it raised red flags. And then from a political point of view, I was uncomfortable with it too, because I thought it was promoting a kind of, Cold War chauvinism and jingoism. And I also just thought it was not the right way to go after Donald Trump. The way to go after Donald Trump was to, take him on the issues. And partly why Russiagate has persisted for so long is because the Democrats who played such a big role in generating Russiagate, the corporate Democrats, liberals, have been so resistant to taking on the issues. So, that is, I think, what fueled my initial skepticism. And that only grew as this thing got increasingly bigger, and it was increasingly obvious that there was no evidence to support so many of the core assertions. But yet still it grew into a bigger thing, and it became, it sort of died down a little bit now. But as we know, for over 2 years, it sort of was the core of the so-called resistance to Trump, which I thought was just a political disaster on top of being so journalistically reckless.
It's funny. When this first started, my thought was all of these guys have a dog in this hunt. The Democratic Party was looking for some way to absolve themselves of blame for Hillary Clinton losing to reality show hosts.
Yep.
The media circles hated his guts, and I think some of them might have thought that they were fighting the good fight. You know, they were doing God's work by going against an ogre. But in doing so, kind of getting rid of all notion of journalistic integrity and success. I mean, it got obscene. I remember at one point, like news stories would come out and people would be like, "We got him," and you find out like a day later, okay, we don't have him. And it was always in one direction. You know, it was always something that we got Trump doing, that we finally found ties with Russia, and oh my God, we didn't find ties with Russia. It was obscene. It was absolutely obscene. So let me ask you this: based on what we know now, what are some of the problems in the story? Because Mueller came out with his report. It was supposed to be a bombshell report. And the report essentially said that Democrats got everything they wanted with the exception of Trump, and there's no collusion. But there are problems with the report. And you made that known in the Real Clear Politics article. And that was even before the court case came out. So before we get to the court thing that just came out recently that broke, what were some of the issues and the flaws with the Mueller report that we know of now?
Well, let's look broadly at what Russiagate is. So we have, I think, three core aspects. There's the allegation that Russia engaged in Mueller's words, a sweeping and systematic interference campaign. There's the suspicion that the Trump campaign conspired with it, so collusion. And then there's the question of whether Trump obstructed justice in trying to impede the investigation into both the first two things. So let's take the first thing I mentioned, which is the allegation of Russian government interference. So Mueller says in his report that there was a sweeping and systematic Russian government interference campaign. There's two main problems with this, that's because there are two main aspects, Mueller says, of this alleged Russian interference operation. He says that there was the hacking and leaking of Democratic Party emails, and there was a social media campaign. So let's take the first one. When it comes to the hacking and leaking of Democratic Party emails, look, I'm not one of these people that rules out the possibility that Russia stole the emails or somebody inside Russia stole the emails. You know, there are theories that it was an insider.
Yeah.
People like Bill Binney, who is a highly esteemed former technical director of the NSA, he's shown evidence that shows that some of the data that from the DNC was transferred via a thumb drive.
Yeah, it was like a leak as opposed to a hack.
Yeah, and I think that needs to be taken seriously. I don't think you can say all that is conclusive because any number of scenarios are possible. Like that data could have been transferred after it was hacked.
Yeah.
But I think Benny needs to be listened to, and he's been totally silenced when it comes to mainstream discussion and even some progressive discussion of this topic as well, which I think is unfortunate. And we also don't know, and Mueller's report itself in laying out his case for Russia hacking and leaking Democratic Party emails, there are instances, and I point this out in my latest piece for Real Clear Investigations, that Mueller uses qualified tentative language to talk about the core act of stealing the emails. He's describing the moment where he's suggesting that the GRU officers stole Democratic Party emails, but he says that during these sessions, GRU officers, quote, appear to have stolen thousands of emails. So he's qualifying his assertion there. He's not saying they stole the emails during this period. He's saying that they appear to have stolen them. Which says to me that he's engaged in some qualified language to cover up for the fact that he doesn't actually have specific knowledge. And he also acknowledges straight up that he doesn't know how the emails made their way to WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
He suggested in his indictment, and he suggests in the report.
There's also another weird aspect to that I continuously bring up that seems to be the glaring that nobody really cares about. If you really was trying to get to the bottom of this, wouldn't you go to the person who supposedly is at the center of it, Julian Assange? I mean, Assange was literally sitting in an embassy for 7 years. He wasn't going anywhere. He was right there. It looks like it's the weirdest loop or the weirdest omission in the report. There are a few omissions, but that just seems to be a glaring one that people just kind of roll past.
I totally agree, and I point that I flagged that in my piece. But just to finish the previous thought, so
Yeah.
Mueller suggests that he doesn't outright say, because he can't say it because it's probably false, that Guccifer 2.0, who he alleges is a Russian intelligence cutout, that Guccifer 2.0 transferred the emails to WikiLeaks, which makes no sense in terms of even its own internal logic. Because for that to be true, that would have meant that Julian Assange would have announced that he had those emails before he even communicated with Guccifer 2.0 and before he received files from Guccifer 2.0. That's according to Mueller's own timeline, and you can read about it in my piece. And yes, as you point out, Mueller did not speak to Julian Assange, which is a totally glaring omission. Assange has made overtures to the U.S. government, to Congress to speak. He has said the Russian government was not his source, but yet Mueller apparently had no interest in speaking to him, and that is a very glaring omission, to say the least.
You named three things. You said that, based on the case, that there was certain logic associated with the Russia thing, and you mentioned that there were problems associated with it in and of itself, meaning essentially what we know now. What's the judge? A judge recently came out like, look, there are
Yeah,
two questions on this.
right. So let me finish. So right. So okay. So Mueller says that there are two principal aspects of this Russian interference operation: the hacking and leaking, which I just addressed, and now let's move on to the second one. Okay, which is this social media campaign run by the Internet Research Agency that was supposedly aimed to sow discord in U.S. society.
Right.
Now, first of all, there's one problem with this narrative, which is that if you look at all these ads and social media posts that the Internet Research Agency put out, you'll see clearly that they're all basically juvenile clickbait and almost entirely unrelated to the actual election. There's Jesus memes, there's
Masturbation memes.
there's masturbation meme. It's silly clickbait in an obvious attempt to basically attract followers. And then what clickbait firms do is they leverage their followers to sell ads to people, and that's what the Internet Research Agency did. But somehow this gets spun into a sweeping and sophisticated Russian social media operation, which is just a joke on itself. Another glaring hole is the fact, and I point this out in the piece, that although Mueller says that this social media operation was a principal component of the Russian government's sweeping and systematic interference campaign, he never actually asserts that this troll farm is connected to the Russian government and conducted its juvenile clickbait in cooperation with the Russian government. And that's why he was forced to just admit at his closing press conference that this is a private Russian entity. It's basically a private company. And a judge in the case where that issue is being brought, because Mueller indicted this troll farm, the troll farm, which is controlled by a firm called Concord, and Concord is challenging this case in court. Concord challenged Mueller for doing this, for saying that you accused us of being a part of a Russian government operation, even though in your indictment and if in the details of your report, you never actually show and you never allege a concrete link between us and the Russian government. And this judge this order just came out. The judge has rebuked Mueller for doing that, saying that that was an infringement of Concord's rights, basically, that they were impugned falsely, which is a huge rebuke, and it raises a question. So if Mueller is being woefully disingenuous about the second element of what he calls the Russian government's sweeping and systematic interference campaign, then what else is he being disingenuous about?